and welcome to the Dan, and Not Dan Sports Show. I'm your host, Professional Dan, and thanks for joining us. We decided to get a little festive here and do this show in costume. If you're stuck for costume ideas, feel free to copy us. All we did was go into the closet, throw two unrelated pieces together, and come up with a name for it. For example, I put on this football jersey and chef's hat and became the Gridiron Chef. Meticulous Dan?
Well, Professional Dan, I grabbed this referee's shirt, cape, and vampire fangs to become the Vampire. And now I'm losing the teeth because they're obnoxious.
What did you end up with, Drunk Dan?
Professional Dan, I am a confused byproduct of the Soviet occupation of East Germany. Prost!
And how about you, Not Dan?
I was a little unclear on the concept, so I just came as a pirate.
Outstanding! Well, the NFL season is really taking shape, and it seems like the difference between the good teams and the bad teams has never been clearer.
Very true, Professional Dan. The league has prided itself on parity over the past few years, but not this season.
Can you pinpoint a reason?
I don't think you can. For each team, it's a different...
I can. Between the upcoming labor issues and the economic collapse, some teams are being straight up stingy. Tampa Bay has spent as little money as possible, and it shows in the product on the field. It's a similar story for Kansas City, Tennessee, and Cleveland, where the only reason they're not playing Brady Quinn is because they have to pay him more if he plays 70% of the snaps this year.
Well, that's an excellent point, but keep in mind that the team with the second most amount of salary cap space is the New Orleans Saints. Probably the best team in the league right now. Washington, Oakland, and Detroit, on the other hand, are all very close to the salary cap, but these teams are, as usual, suffering from bad personnel decisions. So I don't think you can pinpoint one reason. There are a lot of factors.
I've got it. The problem is alphabetism. God hates letters towards the end of the alphabet, and that's why anyone having a baby right now should name him Aaron.
Okay. Do you have any evidence to back this up?
Look at the last four teams in alphabetical order. St. Louis, Tampa Bay, Tennessee, and Washington. Three of them are winless. The Redskins have 2 wins against St. Louis and Tampa Bay. That means that these 4 teams could not possibly be doing any worse. The next 3, San Diego, San Francisco, and Seattle, are all 500 or worse.
And this is all God's fault.
Can you think of any other explanation?
What about the undefeated teams?
Big play defense is becoming a huge factor in a team's success. Denver, Indianapolis, and New Orleans were all high-powered offenses last year, but only Indy made the playoffs, losing in the first round. They failed because the defense couldn't make plays. Now they can, and these 3 teams are the league's elite.
What I think is interesting is that none of those teams, and you can throw in New England and Pittsburgh as well, has a top 10 running back. Minnesota's the only team winning on the strength of their rusher.
I think you're onto a good point there, Drunk Dan, about the direction the league is going. With so many college players coming in from a spread background, the entire league seems to be moving away from the run. Only one guy in the league right now is averaging 100 yards per game, Cedric Benson, and he only just reached that threshold with a huge revenge match against his former team. The teams that are slow to pick up on this trend are struggling. The Skins, Titans, Rams, and Chiefs are all trying to have a workhorse back, and they're failing.
And the other side of that is, clearly, you can't win without a franchise-type QB. Each team is only as good as their quarterback.
A hackneyed and usually flawed argument, but I'd say that sentiment might be more true now than ever, so I'll let it slide.
So with all these bad teams, and with the recent success of several rookie head coaches, we're bound to see some firings by next January. Let's do some matchmaking. We're all expecting some famous ex-coaches to get back into the game.
Top of the list has to be Bill Cowher. He'll have his pick of jobs, and Dan Snyder will offer him the most money to join the Redskins.
As much as I'd love to see it, I think Cowher recognizes the problem in Washington and will stay away from that job, tempting as it may be. He might also get an under-the-table offer from Cleveland, but will decline that, and so they'll keep Eric Mangini for another year. So while I'd like to see what Cowher could do with Jason Campbell in Washington, what I think will actually happen is he'll coach Carolina, and Jason Campbell will be his quarterback there.
I would just like to step in right now and say that anyone who has Tony Dungy taking over a team next year is crazy. He's taking 3 years off, minimum.
Agreed. I also think Mike Holmgren will only return if he really likes the situation. If the Titans get rid of Jeff Fisher, that might be the place for Holmgren. But I don't see a lot of other teams he'd be hungry to coach.
Well, I don't think either of them can stay away from the game they love. Holmgren comes back to coach the Cowboys, and Dungy takes over the Bills.
Cower, Dungy, and Holmgren all ended their previous gigs voluntarily, but some other well-known head coaches were dumped. So one might expect John Gruden and Mike Shanahan to be even hungrier to come back. Thoughts?
Once Cower declines, they'll become the top options in Washington. And the only job more tempting for both would be San Diego, if Norv Turner fails to once again sneak the Chargers into the playoffs and make a deep run. And as much as I like Cower, Shanahan might be the answer in Washington. He can do a lot with a little on the offensive line, which they need, and he coached Clinton Portis before in Denver, so he already knows his strengths.
Then it becomes a question of what happens to the quarterback. Shanny will find a guy he loves in the draft and try to develop him. Gruden will sign Jeff Garcia, Dante Culpepper, and Vinny Testaverde and make them compete with Todd Collins for the job.
So let's say Washington gets Shanahan. Can I see Gruden's ego working with A.J. Smith's ego in San Diego? Not really. I'm going to say Ron Meeks pulls the upset and gets that job, if it's even available. Gruden ends up in Buffalo.
But what about Oakland? Will Tom Cable survive the season?
If he doesn't, none of those coaches will go there. It's career suicide. I hope against hope that Al Davis is smart enough to realize after this season that Jamarcus Russell isn't going to cut it and that Tom Cable is the best coach he can get right now. And no, that's not because Tom Cable is a good coach.
Alright, well, we call this the Dan, and Not Dan Sports Show, and sooner or later someone's going to figure out that we pretty much only talk about football. So let's talk a little baseball. These playoffs have been riddled with bad calls by the umpires that instant replay could prevent. Your thoughts?
It's obvious. The technology is there, why not use it to your advantage?
Last game I watched, I went away to do work for 10 minutes, came back, and the same guy was still at bat. We don't need anything making baseball take longer.
Bud Selig has a legitimate concern about how instant replay would lengthen the games, but the solution is simple, really. Do what the NFL does in the last 2 minutes, but for the whole game. Teams don't get challenges. They all come from the officials on video monitors upstairs. If a call looks wrong at a first glance, they halt play and take a look at it.
How about NBA basketball? Give me your early finals predictions.
Phil Jackson can't ever win just one. Lakers repeat, this time over the Celtics in 5.
LeBron finally gets his with Shaq on the team. Cavs over Lakers in 7.
I have to go with the Lakers too, with the Spurs giving them the most trouble. In the finals, they play the Bulls, who surprise everyone in the East, but then get swept by LA.
NCAA basketball, Final Four, and champion.
Louisville, North Carolina, Memphis, Pittsburgh. North Carolina repeats.
Too safe. Oklahoma, Michigan State, Xavier, and BYU, with Oklahoma winning it all.
I'll try to split the difference in craziness here. Pittsburgh, Connecticut, Duke, Syracuse, and Pittsburgh over Duke in the final.
Anyone want to take a stab at hockey?
Let's see.
There's
The Penguins won last year, right?
Stanford Cup, is it?
Montreal Penguins? No.
Hang on.
Stinky Cup?
What's that other city in Canada?
Looks like the Caps are off to a good start. I think they were good last year.
Stanley Penguins.
Pittsburgh Cup.
Avalanche looking good in the West.
Well, this was a bad idea.
Let's go with Capitals over Avalanche in... It's a best-of-7 series, right? It's I'll say in 5, just to be safe.
Whatever happened last year will happen again.
New York over Los Angeles?
Which New York team?
The good one?
That's Rangers over Kings, then?
The Rangers play baseball, stupid. And the Kings...
That's all the time we have on the Dan, and Not Dan Sports Show. Thanks for watching.